Welcome to Super Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Shahid Durrani. Today's guest is someone who's completely changing the game for entrepreneurs with ADHD. Meet Sky Waterson. She's the founder of Unconventional Organization, and she's built this incredible multi-six-figure coaching company that's all about helping neurodivergent leaders actually succeed without fighting against their own brains. So welcome to our show, Sky.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So tell me, when was, that light bulb moment when you realized that ADHD wasn't holding you back? It was actually your secret weapon.
Well, it took a while. I found out I had ADHD at the beginning of my PhD. So I was diagnosed pretty late. And up until that point, I was in a position where it had contributed to a lot of burnout, a lot of, gap years, that kind of thing on my journey. And it was really only once I had a name for what was going on in my brain and what was happening, that I could do the research that built the strategies that made it so that now I can, say that I'm unmedicated, I have ADHD, and I run a team and a business, and it's great. It's great. It's great with the right strategies.
Yeah. So can you share your go-to strategy when it comes to someone that has, ADHD, what they could actually start working on immediately while watching this episode in their business to see some improvements just to get the ball rolling?
100%. In fact, this is something I give away. So you can just message me super at Unconventional Organization on Instagram, and I will give you this whole process. No one should feel overwhelmed, because the real thing that a lot of people struggle with is they struggle with overwhelm. The sense that everything is on fire, they can't really remember everything. We struggle with working memory when we have ADHD, and this can lead to a lot of frustration and a lot of chasing your tail, checking your emails, using that like a task list when it's really not. So the first thing I want you to do, and you guys can just do this now, find a piece of paper or a Google Doc or something you're going to use again, is I want you to take a second and brain dump everything that's in your head. So don't go to your email list, don't go to your other task list, just what's in your head. And from there, I want you to look at that list of things, and it could have taken you a few minutes to do that. You might have paused and written the whole list, because you'll be surprised what's in your head once you get started. I want you to look at that list, and I want you to identify what are the things that are on that list that are urgent, as in they have to be done tomorrow, or there will be a significant external negative consequence. A bill won't be paid. You will be presenting at a conference that you had known nothing about. What is the thing that you need to do? Your team won't be ready for something. That is your urgent tasks. And once you do that, you'll find for most people, there is no more than about 5 or less. Some people have none, and that's super normal, that are truly, truly urgent. That then allows us to go, okay, not everything is on fire. Not everything has to be done right now. So then we can approach the rest of the list with more intention. What on that list is in my 80-20? What is the 20% that is going to get me the 80% return on my goals? And I teach people how to set goals in an ADHD-friendly way and all that kind of thing. What is the thing that is going to help me move closer towards my goals? And how do I actually block that out in my calendar? How do I actually make time to do that? That's what we talk about next.
Yeah. So this type of strategy, it actually helps to clarify or bring some clarity, right? And that clarity decreases the anxiety.
Exactly.
Because for me, growing up, I grew up with anxiety, and then as I got older, around COVID, I just crashed. And then when I went to the hospital, I couldn't breathe and et cetera. And when they did all the tests on me, they couldn't figure it out. But before that, I was diagnosed with autism, and a lot of things started becoming so much more clearer from my past because of that, right? And once I realized that, and once I had that crash, that's when everything came together, and I really went deep into the internal world and worked on the mindset aspect of it.
Yeah.
I created that gap between the thoughts and the trueness of who we are. And that gap has allowed me to, use that, like you mentioned, like actual strategy, a bigger strategy to overcome those anxieties and then start going ahead too. So these kind of exercises mean so much in people's lives, but they just don't know where to go, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And a lot of times people will say, oh, well, I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, so this doesn't apply to me. It does if you feel like it works for you. These are executive functioning systems that we all need at some point. Or people will say, oh, well, this is just a list. I've done a list. And the truth is, it's not a list. It's a filter. It's different. We all write lists on the back of napkins and then throw them away 5 seconds later. Like, that is not what we're doing here, because that reduces the anxiety for a moment, but you're not truly looking at what needs to be done. And before you need to do that, you need to focus yourself before you can move on to what we talk about, in the rest of the program, which is focusing for your team. Focusing, if you're the ADHD boss, you have to be a leader for your team.
Yeah, that's super important. So I'm curious about the sensory stack strategy. Can you share what that is exactly, and why does it work so well for ADHD entrepreneurs, that are facing those tough tasks?
Yeah, I love that question. So we, a lot of times what will happen is once somebody identifies what is truly important, then the question becomes, why aren't we doing it? And the reason is usually, I don't want it. And that's normal. That's normal when you have these different ways of thinking. There's a lot of resistance towards tasks. And so what I do is I teach a step into focus routine. One of the first things I teach you how to increase the stimulation around you to make doing a boring task not so difficult. We do that with sensory stacking. So if you think about sensory stacking, you've got 5 senses, taste, touch, sound, smell, sight. These are the things that are going to, for a lot of people, we think, oh, we're really overstimulated in this world. We are very visually overstimulated and auditorily overstimulated. We can be very understimulated in other ways in our lives. We have this phone, but it's really only getting 2 of your senses and kind of capturing them in a way that doesn't necessarily feel very fulfilling. So what we want to do instead is we want to say, okay, well, let's look at all of your senses. And usually what I'll do is I'll make people create a bit of a sensory menu where they'll pick 5 things for each sense. By the time you've done that, you will realize that you have very little understanding of what you like to do. And so we'll say, okay, what are the things you can do? And these are kind of things you can do while you're working. So for sight, it might be like, I want to be somewhere I can look out a window. I want to be somewhere where I am, maybe watching like a really cool background on my computer while we're doing this. We actually do take a lot of breaks visually when we're ADHD. We find ourselves like looking away a lot. So something to look at is really helpful. Sound, obviously, that's been discussed many, many times, like white noise, brown noise, music, podcasts, the whole thing. And then we talk about, touch. So I have like fidgets that I have with me all the time. You see some of them behind me. There might be comfortable seating, that kind of thing. And what we're doing when we're sensory stacking is we're going, okay, let's, one of these things on its own isn't really going to add up to enough for us to want to sit down and work. But if we stack them together, we say, okay, well, I'll have a coffee and maybe some like crunchy, fruity, food, and I'm going to sit somewhere nice. I'm going to listen to some music. I'm going to, do all those kinds of things. Suddenly it doesn't feel so understimulating to start working. And then I take people through a step into focus routine that actually helps you get into the zone. But that first piece for people can often save them hours and hours and hours of procrastination.
That's wonderful. It reminds me of for me, I can listen to the same song, and I would love to hear your expert feedback on that. So I could listen to the same song hundreds of times and not get bored. Like I could, people around me, they'll say, oh my God, you have this song on again. And they can only do it maybe twice, like a few times, right? But I can actually, if I like a song, I'll listen. And the thing that came to mind is that I don't listen to the words. So when I like the beat, I get into that flow of the beat and I can listen to that beat forever. So people that get focused on the words, words, I guess they get bored. That's what I'm coming up with, but I would love to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah, well, I think this is something that I find always very interesting. People say, okay, well, just tell me what are my dopamine things, just give them to me and I'll do them. But everyone's really different. This one is very, to your own taste. So usually what I recommend is we create a menu. But what we're doing here is when you look at the research, what you find is that people who have ADHD, it seems to be that we don't get that big boost of dopamine at the start of a task. We, like people who are more neurotypical, they know there's a reward coming at the end. So just starting the tasks gives them a boost of dopamine, a sort of like thumbs up. This is going to be great when you're done. If you're ADHD, then your brain just kind of looks at you and says, this is really boring. I don't want to do this at all. Why are we doing this? And so we're boosting it ourselves to get us to that same starting point so that we can start. And what that looks like is really different. People always start with kind of and I'll get a coffee and some music and that kind of thing. But by the time we've worked together for a while, it gets really weird. It gets really like, well, I like this, I like to listen to this kind of music this many times. And that's where we get it's this song and I play it at this speed at this time and that can be how it works sometimes, which is funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned about the 2-minute focus formula briefly, but could you break it down for us? I'd love to understand how it actually helps people get out of those, those distraction cycles.
100%. So I touched on the beginning piece of that focus formula at the beginning when I told you, you guys could just DM me and I'll give it to you. When we talk about, the point of this focus formula, people often think it's just in order to understand what we need to do. Like, okay, this is my task list. I have to do my task. Sometimes, people have heard things like just pick 3 and do those 3. The real reality is, especially if you're an entrepreneur, your job in life is to ignore things that are not going to drive you forward and do things that are going to drive you forward and things that are really urgent. Those are kind of the things you need to do. So a lot of what I teach in this process in the filtering system is we're filtering a lot of stuff out. There is a lot of stuff. I'm sure you guys know your inbox is probably inundated with stuff that you could genuinely never respond to because it's a distraction. And for some reason, that is the thing that we often respond to. It is the stuff we want to tick off. It's the stuff that we resist handing over to an executive assistant, which we should probably be getting if we're making money. And, all of these different things. And we're doing that because we don't want to hire that new person. We don't want to we don't want to do a pipeline of our sales. We don't want to build a cadence for sales tracking or a lead flow magnet. These are the things that we are avoiding doing. And so the purpose of the focus filter, the 2-minute focus filter, is to very quickly identify what is urgent, what is truly important, and then we figure out why you're not doing it.
Yeah. And that assistant point that you made, that sometimes we fear to bring on someone to help out, and we get our own way, but it's so important for the growth stages to have that support. But the beautiful thing now is that you could just create an AI agent that will do a lot of the things that you want them to do. And there's more technology coming out where, it's going to function a lot like the human brain on a browser, right? So, those kind of things, when they come out, it'll be very easy to have multiple executive assistants managing different aspects of your business. So that's great news. Another point I wanted to talk about is that dopamine you mentioned. For me and the people that we work with, we found, meditation visualization, but meditation brings you in a very deep state of visualization, if that makes sense. And you create that dopamine habit. You create that memory of it in your body. So, and when you practice consistently and you do it more, on a regular basis without missing, you find that starts operating even when you're idle. Would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there is research, some research to indicate that there are definitely benefits to things like meditation and mindfulness practices when it comes to ADHD that they've found. There's also benefits to
it helped
exercise.
Me a lot.
Yeah, definitely. There's also benefits to things like movement, supporting your working memory. But overall, ADHD is a very treatable condition. There's a lot of different tools tools. And it's one of the things that I often say to people is like, if you are struggling with this executive functioning, if it feels like something that is persistent and pervasive across time, across your life, there are a lot of systems and strategies and processes that can get you to a place where you are much more focused, much more organized. And it's pretty, I don't want to say simple, because I think it takes a lot of information to get that simplicity, but it can be quite fast. And for a lot of people, they don't even realize that that's an option.
Good point. What do you see with ADHD entrepreneurs getting wrong most often when they try to force themselves into, cookie cutter type productivity systems that are out there?
The biggest thing that I see is that people will get into this very unhealthy spiral where they will be pushing themselves. They're like, I've just got to do it. I just need to have more willpower. I just need to push through, and they won't do it. And then they won't do it because that's not how it works. And then they'll tell themselves that they should do it, and they'll get into this almost like shame spiral,
regret,
where they'll beat themselves up. And but the truth is, at the end of the day, your business is not getting better because you're trying to do it in this way and you're trying to force yourself to do it in this way. Some people are very resistant to the idea that you could do it in a different way. They're like, I have to do it the way that I was taught, because if I don't, there's some kind of moral failing. There is no moral failing. At the end of the day, if you have a healthy business with a great team of people and you're making money, you're good. That's it. That's the game. So however you do that is fine. It's totally up to you. I personally, I am a writer, but I very rarely write. I spend a lot of time talking to my phone or to, AI apps that will ask me questions and help me think and help me write. So, I'm a writer who does a lot of talking and transcribing, and that's how I do it. That's okay.
It's the
There's
best.
many different ways. There's many different ways to run a business.
Yeah, it is. It is. And but speaking of that, there's a app, I don't know if you checked it out, Whisper Flow. Flow, I think, is spelled WISPR. Definitely check it out. And anybody in the audience, definitely check it out. So it's highly recommended. The way you do it is actually so much better to just speak your mind and let AI fix it for you. So this really cool app, because what it does is,
Yeah. I'm writing it down.
yes, it puts it in sequence for you. So if you make mistakes, so you can upload that into AI and do things with it, right? You can create stories, content. So
yeah, exactly.
Just off topic.
You work with your strengths. No, that's good. It's exactly right. That's what we talk about all the time is, what are your strengths? And something that we don't talk about is actually there are strengths to having ADHD and being an entrepreneur. The creative problem solving, the out of the box thinking, those kinds of, the tendency towards action in a market where you might need to pivot. These are very, very helpful things, as long as you're building them into systems and strategies that are going to help you with the consistency side of it.
So Sky, in your clients, the people that you work with, specifically, with this curable condition, how do you deal with individuals that have a problem with how people see them? How people think of them. I had a big struggle with this. It took the longest time for me. Is the concern of what others think of me held me back like crazy, and I think it's one of the major energies that stop success, I feel. How do you work with your clients when it comes to worrying about what others think of what they're doing and how they're operating and what they're doing in their business, for example?
That's a great question. And I will say a lot of times when people come to me, they do have a lack of self-confidence. And how I work is honestly, I tend to be quite, we don't necessarily want a pep talk. I mean, I can give you one, but most of the time people are at a point where what they want to know is that what they're doing is normal. And when you work in a program like the one I teach, you meet other successful entrepreneurs who have brains like you, who work like you, who say the things you don't say out loud, but they say it in the group, and you're like, that's me. I didn't realize anyone did that too. And so often what I find is that what I love about having such an exclusive community of, entrepreneurs and other, ADHD bosses is that you are able to see, oh, well, this person is ahead of me and they are in this position as well. And that is often the game-changing piece for people.
That is actually a really good point. when you're part of the community, when you're vibing with your tribe, it changes everything. Yeah, it's a pretty cool point that you just made. Yeah, that's definitely important. Yeah. So I had another question. Oh, so about the, worrying about what others think. For me, what I have done and what we do with others is the aspect of going deep within and, calming the mind and being in that observing framework. You're observing your thoughts and emotions, right? And all the visualization, etc. And creating that gap and then realizing that there's more to you than just the name and the body. There's this expanded consciousness, awareness of who you truly are. And once you start stepping into that, everything else loses its grip on you. So it's so much easier to shift the paradigm that may be holding you back in those areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think understanding who you are and how you work and those kinds of things, it's part of the journey in many ways of being an entrepreneur. It is part of what that is. And nobody really tells you that at the beginning. You think it's just about running a business, but that's one of the ways you run a successful business.
Yeah. Wow, it's great talking to you, Sky. It's so nice to have you on here. And I love what you're doing, and we need more of you out there and helping this niche because it's needed. And just the days of cookie cutter are pretty much over, and AI is showing us that as well. Because now even in marketing, what you're seeing is that the promotion is happening to the individual's interest. Like it's molding itself, it's molding its landing page, its content, its copywriting to match that specific individual. Now that is personalization. That is the future, right? That is the mindset that we need to get used to, that we don't have to just go and follow what one specific way is, because that's probably why it doesn't work for many people, because we're trying to force something in that form,
Exactly. Yeah. There's multiple ways to do things. There's multiple ways to be successful.
Yeah. Well, no, it was great. Thank you so much. Audience, thank you for joining us once again. Get in touch with Sky if you would like some guidance or you have any questions. And same for me. If you want to get in touch, definitely do.
Yeah, no worries. You can find me at Unconventional Organization if you want any strategies, tips. Also, you can find me, my podcast, the ADHD Skills Lab, or you can message me on Instagram. Just message me Super, and I will send you the 2-minute focus formula.